Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Welcome to another version of Let's Talk Tropics here on this Friday. Hopefully everybody's having a great day so far. We're going to go through quite a few things here across when it comes to the tropics. Not only are we going to be looking at the latest hurricane track, we're also going to be taking a look at how the hurricane cone works, as a lot of folks were talking about how the cone is now covering parts of western Louisiana, and why I'm going to explain how that whole thing works and whether or not we need to be concerned with that here as we go through this Let's Talk Tropics. So going to go ahead and get started right away here. We do have scattered showers and thunderstorms that are already out across Acadiana. Sea breeze already starting to work here right along the Cameron Parish coast. And then we've also got some thunderstorms that look like they want to continue to develop here across central Louisiana. Some of that will be shifting southward. So keep that in mind. Chances for rain are going to be fairly high again today. Not everybody is going to get the rain, but if you do get under one of those thunderstorms, you could get some locally heavy rain. And as we look at the traffic cams here, I-10 pretty much here through Lafayette and going over into St. Martin Parish looks to be rain-free right now with partly cloudy skies. Last check of the temperature, we were holding at 93 degrees with a heat index of 108, and I know we've got a heat advisory in place for a large part of Acadiana. I did want to take you down to the Yucatan Peninsula, where Hurricane Beryl has already made landfall this morning and is continuing to move off toward the west-northwest. Winds have dropped down to 85 miles per hour, so it still is a hurricane, even though it's currently over land. It's located at 20.7 north and 88.3 west. Again, those winds 85, and the pressure at 980 millibars. You can see, not a great beach day there on the Yucatan Peninsula. So let's look at the satellite imagery here. And the center of circulation, again, is over land, and Recon was out there earlier and was not able to find a really good defined center at this point, so it is starting to take its toll, but we think the center of circulation is probably right about there, and it's going to continue to make its way offshore and move its way on into the Bay of Campeche, where it will have a chance to re-intensify. And just to give you some perspective of where Beryl is and where Louisiana is, and also where we're expecting the eventual landfall somewhere between the South Texas coast and the northern Mexican coast, it does appear that the Texas coast now seems to be a little bit more likely for a landfall. And we've got some differences in opinion when it comes to the computer models on not just the location, although the location's pretty much firm just about with all of the models, but it's more of the intensity. And it's all going to depend on how quickly it moves off of the Yucatan Peninsula and how long it decides to linger over the Bay of Campeche. So the latest that we have from the 10 o'clock advisory, and the numbers are there on your left, 20.7 north and 88.3 west, winds are 85 with the pressure at 980. And as you're looking at the cone here, the eventual landfall here is just slightly to the north of the previous advisory, which basically had it coming in to the southern tip of Texas. But again, all of these points that we have had here over the last several days, and we're going to go over some of the past models here too. Everything has fallen within the cone. Now you do see up here where western parts of Louisiana are in the cone. That's based on this forecast right here on Wednesday, when the storm's going to be a tropical depression. And what we have is the margin of error on day 7 does extend into Louisiana. But what I'll tell you is there's not a chance that this is going to move on the outside of the envelope and then make a turn like this and head into Louisiana. That will not happen. But I'll explain why we have a big cone here coming up in just a little bit, and I'll also look back at the cone that we had a few days ago and where everything has fallen since then. So that is the position, and again, a lot of that is based on where the hurricane computer models go, and what you want to look at is where they are clustered, and right there is where they're clustered for a landfall, anywhere basically between Corpus Christi and then going down toward the Brownsville area. And yes, indeed, these have lifted a little bit farther toward the north. And then we think it's going to get pulled up into the mid-levels and then kind of shoot its way out to the east, which eventually would bring a little more of an onshore flow for us here in Louisiana and also would bring better chances for rain. But that's not going to be coming in until sometime early next week. The intensity models, as I've said, have been kind of all over the place, although between where we are now and where we're expecting a landfall in Texas or Mexico, you can see all of the models are pretty much keeping this as a tropical storm or a Category 1 hurricane. Nothing really goes over that threshold. But some of the ones that keep it over water perhaps a little bit longer might get it up to a Category 2. But you can see generally the consensus with all the models is this is where the landfall is going to be, and then quickly everything's going to drop off in intensity after that. But there are some slower models that are out here as well, and we'll look at all the different models here and their tracks and their intensity as we go through this Let's Talk Tropics. So let's start with the GFS model. And the GFS model has a storm that's already inland here on Monday morning. So this is 7 o'clock Monday morning. You can see there are some fairly strong winds on the east side of that, but the maximum wind I can find on this particular model is 53.6 knots. So that is still a tropical storm according to the GFS, and it is one of the farther north running models that we have. So let's look at the Euro model, and the Euro model here also is predicting a tropical storm. Winds maximum 52.2 knots, so that's not quite a hurricane. This also has the low a little bit farther toward the south and a little bit slower. Remember, the GFS had it already on land while the Euro still has it offshore. So negligible when it comes to about where it's going to be. I would call this in the ballpark as far as a comparison between the Euro model as well as the GFS. But I do want to look at the HWRF, and again, this is more of a hurricane-specific model, and this is one of the stronger of the four that I'm going to be showing you, and this definitely comes on shore as a hurricane with winds at 86.4 knots. So you're talking about Category 2, borderline Category 2 on that hurricane. Good onshore flow on the east side of that, and even a pretty good onshore flow farther out. But notice how the winds really drop off fairly quickly, and they're down below 15 knots once you get out here. So a strong onshore flow that would probably cause some tidal flooding, but nothing that would be a storm surge like you would see in this particular area. And this particular model, again, is the farthest north of the four that I'm going to show you. Remember, the GFS was right about here and the Euro was right about here. So the last one I'm going to show you is what we call the HAFS model, and this is kind of an upgrade of this model and what we're going to be transitioning to as we go in the future, and that HWRF model is eventually going to be discontinued. But this one is the strongest of the four. Wind speeds maximum nearly 100 knots, so you're talking about a major hurricane there at Category 3, but notice it's also a lot farther to the south. Remember, the GFS was about right here, HWRF was up here, Euro was out here, and then you've got the HAFS model, which is right there. And again, all four of these are within that cone of uncertainty, so it is within the forecast track. So I wanted to go and look at what's going to happen beyond that, and also kind of get to why Louisiana is in the cone now. As long as Hurricane Beryl can maintain its strength, it would be affected by the mid-levels of the atmosphere. So you got this trough that's here in the middle, and then that would generally try to pick up the system and pull it up this way. Now, that is if you still have a pretty good solid inner core that's vertically stacked. It would be affected by the mid and the upper levels of the atmosphere. If this is torn apart by the Yucatan, then it's going to focus more on a ridge of high pressure that's over here, but down at the lower levels of the atmosphere, down at the surface. So that's where that's the models that are pushing it more in a west-northwesterly direction, heading it over toward the Mexican coastline. But if this is a stronger type of system and rises higher in the atmosphere, it can be affected by the winds that are also higher in the atmosphere, and that's why you would see more of a northerly track. So some of you maybe have heard, well, if it goes stronger, it's going to go north, and if it stays weaker, it's going to stay south. It isn't every hurricane that does that. It's just based on your mid-levels, high levels, and low levels of the atmosphere. There are different levels of the atmosphere. It's not just what you see here on the ground. So let's look at what some of the risks are, first of all. And as Beryl moves inland, it is going to be bringing in the rain. Again, let's say we have a landfall here and then it kind of curves over here as a tropical depression. Well, then all of this area here would have a risk, a slight risk of some flooding, and then outside of that you have a marginal risk. So rains will be out there for sure. And as far as winds, we might get some tropical storm force winds in our offshore waters, but that's 5 to 10%, those lighter green shades there. So the bulk of the stronger winds, and this is a map of the possibility of a tropical storm wind coming in any particular area. So you can see most of Acadiana is outside of that window, with the bulk of this heading toward the Texas Gulf Coast. But with some stronger winds coming in out of the south, that can pile some water along the coast and could potentially push the tides up a little bit higher. And right now I'm expecting tides to be about as high as what we saw with Tropical Storm Alberto about 2 weeks ago. So 1 to 2 feet, maybe 2 to 3 feet above normal for the Cameron Parish coast, and then a little bit less as you go farther toward the east. So I wanted to go back in time, and this is the hurricane cone that was issued on Tuesday morning. So this was Tuesday evening rather. And the hurricane itself was here still south of the Dominican Republic. And this is the model that shows the first landfall in a 7-day forecast. So this is day 7 out here. And you can see the forecast had this on the northern Mexican coast. But I also want to show you that the cone went all the way up here and all the way down here. And all of my models that I have that are showing a landfall are basically in that area right there. So within the cone. So that's 7 days out from where this was and where the landfall was expected. So right now, if you go through time and you look at every one of these points that have happened all the way to the Yucatan Peninsula, every one of these points have fallen within the cone. Now, when we look at the cone, some folks got a little confused here this morning when they saw that Louisiana was in the cone. And as I just said earlier, the hurricane isn't going to come up like this and then make a sharp right-hand turn and come up like this. Each one of these points has a margin of error. So the margin of error is about 26 miles at 12 hours, and it goes out to 220 miles when you get to day 5. So day 5 is at the end of the shaded in white cone, which is right here. So from this point, you have 110 miles, 110 miles, 110 miles, and 110 miles. That is your margin of error, and it's basically a circle. So if you make a circle here, 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 and here, and then you connect the lines of the cone on the outside, that's how the cone actually works. Of course, the margin of error gets larger as you get to day 6 and day 7. So on day 7, the National Hurricane Center is pointing it right there. And I don't have the exact numbers on what the margin of error is, but the margin of error is the same in all different directions. Hence the reason you see a circle here, and that's why western portions of Louisiana are in this. But this is going to be after it's a tropical depression or maybe even a remnant low. So again, this is not going to come here and ride on the outside of the cone and hit us as a hurricane off the Gulf of Mexico. This is going to be a remnant low. It could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could be in any one of these places, because as we do the margin of error, 67% or 2/3 of all of these systems are going to stay within that cone. That's how we've developed the cone, and 67%. And it's kind of funny because about maybe 15 years ago, I went to a hurricane conference and we used to have a line, and you can still download the actual graphic that has the connect the dots line in the middle here. But part of the reason we got rid of the line was folks were so focused on the line that even though they were still within the cone, they weren't paying attention to the risk. So now we've taken the line away and we've left the cone. And what's funny is everybody seems to be more concentrated on what line is going outside of the cone now. So really, when you're looking at these hurricane cones for the next several months when we go through hurricane season, really concentrate on the 5-day cone and take this part out a little bit less, because that's kind of out in la la land. So just a little explanation on how the cone works and what the margin of error is and why Louisiana is all of a sudden in it. But these are going to be indirect effects for us here in Louisiana. Rain is pretty likely next week. We've been telling you that. And storm surge is not likely, but we will have elevated tides along the coast. So let's quickly go through what else is out there right now. We've been looking at disturbance 96L, which is right about in here. It still doesn't look very good. And then there's a flare-up of some convection with more of an upper trough that's off to the northwest. But the National Hurricane Center has become so disinterested now in 96L that they've taken it off the possibility of development over the next 7 days. So the only game we got out there is Beryl at this time. And part of the reason is there is a lot of Saharan dust in the Atlantic right now, really flowing off over here, really flowing off over here. And you've got 96L that's right there, a tropical wave there. And really, it's not going to have much of a chance with all that dry air and dust out there. And as we look at everything into motion, you can even see the dust on this particular satellite image. All this right here, all this out here is all Saharan dust and dry air. And you can see it even more on the Eastern Atlantic satellite image. And you can see how the flow kind of comes out, goes up like that. And that's where your flow is going to be. So a tropical wave here, maybe another one. And here's one way out here that will emerge sometime next week. And we'll keep our eyes on those. So it doesn't look like outside of Beryl that there really is anything else to worry about. But for us here in Acadiana, everything for right now, according to the forecast that we have, indirect impacts for us, higher than normal tides along the Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia, and St. Mary Parish coastlines, probably 2 to 3 feet above normal over Cameron Parish, 1 to 2 feet around the rest of the areas. And then as the remnant low continues to pull in, we'll probably see a better chance for rain for the early part of next week. And most likely, I think I'm going to be talking about tropics on Saturday and Sunday too, as Beryl continues to make its way. But please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if I do go ahead and do a special edition of Let's Talk Tropics on Saturday and or Sunday, if you have those notifications turned on, you'll get the alert that we're going to go ahead and do a show over the course of the weekend. But we'll just watch Beryl, see what happens. But I would say there's a pretty good chance I'm going to be joining you at least on Saturday and probably on Sunday as well. Other than that, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Some of you started your weekend Wednesday afternoon, so hopefully you had that nice long weekend. For the rest of you who still had to work on Thursday and Friday, I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Have a great day.